And now, for our final discussion in today's program, I'm honored to talk to the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Prior to joining the Biden-Harris administration, Secretary Buttigieg served 2 terms as mayor of his hometown of South Bend, Indiana. A graduate of Harvard University and a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, Buttigieg served for 7 years as an officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve, taking a leave of absence from the mayor's office for a deployment to Afghanistan in 2014. In 2019, Secretary Buttigieg launched a historic campaign for president, and in 2021 made history as the first openly gay person confirmed to serve in a president's cabinet. Secretary Buttigieg lives with his husband Chasten and their rescue dogs Buddy and Truman. Secretary Buttigieg, thank you so much for joining me here today. We are truly thrilled to have you with us for this keynote conversation.
Well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I love seeing that image of South Bend in the springtime behind you as well.
As you know, our new infrastructure report card found that America's infrastructure overall has improved a bit over the last 4 years. There are certainly bright spots, but there is so much room for improvement. And with interesting challenges of a recession, a pandemic, inequality, and climate change, there is a lot to do, and we have to do it all in a very difficult environment. Earlier today, we heard our transportation panelists talk about whether the nation can deliver on a big, bold vision for infrastructure. And now we want to hear from you as our Secretary of Transportation. What is the administration's big, bold vision for infrastructure?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Christina, for the chance to join you. And I want to thank ASCE President Jean-Louis Briot, Executive Director Tom Smith, the ASCE's leadership, and all of the members of this organization for your advocacy and support. And as you say, the results of this report card tell us something that we already know, which is that we've got a long way to go and our infrastructure is in tough shape. But I also think the timing of the report card and those grade markings that are within it are telling us something else really important. They're telling us that we are past the point of allowing Infrastructure Week to be a Washington punchline once again. And we're at the point where we can at last seize this moment with a chance for a generational investment in our communities. The disinvestment in infrastructure that's been going on, frankly, for a lifetime is catching up to us. And we're also seeing global competitors getting out ahead of the United States. So that's why now is the time to be bold. You know, another body of research by ASCE showed us the toll that inadequate infrastructure can take on the economy at large. And it suggests that there are trillions at stake in economic productivity over the next 20 years if we don't invest in infrastructure. And that GDP would take a hit, again, at the level of trillions of dollars if we don't act. As a former mayor, I experienced this at a very tangible level. The buck would stop with me whenever there was a hole in the road. And like any mayor, I heard about every pothole in the city everywhere I went. And I remember early in my tenure digging into the numbers and learning that we had enough funding to repave and resurface all of the roads in our city every 100 years or so. And the problem, as every engineer knows, and certainly every mayor north of the Continental Divide, there's no way to get asphalt to last longer than 15 or 20. And in parts of the country like mine, lucky to have it be more than 10. This is a time of year when a lot of people think about daylight coming back and springtime temperatures. There are others among us who just think of this as maximum pothole season. And I think the pothole has become a symbol of the bigger needs that we have. But it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way, but it also won't change unless we make different choices. And that means a meaningful generational investment in our country's infrastructure. And I should add that we know that these investments more than pay for themselves. And we also know that infrastructure is about a lot of things at once. It's even more than roads and bridges and power grids and ports, as essential as that is. It's about investing in a way that creates millions of good paying jobs that last. It's about choices to combat climate change. And it's about building our infrastructure in a way that makes our country a more equitable place for everyone. I also just want to remark briefly on the rescue package that's in front of Congress right now, because these big infrastructure opportunities are ahead, but we have something even more immediate before us at this moment. That's why President Biden and his entire team, including me, are very focused right now on the first step of this ambitious two-step plan, which is rescue followed by recovery. Right now, we're still in the rescue phase. We've got to get shots in arms. We've got to give families the urgent economic relief that they need. We've got to make sure that people have the resources, that schools have the resources, that communities have the resources that they need to fight COVID. Of course, we must expand and enhance our transportation infrastructure. But the opportunity to do that is just around the corner. These next few days, we've got to act just to preserve things like the transit systems that we've already had, that we've already got. So that's why we really need Congress to act quickly to pass the American Rescue Plan. I'm going to be brief because I know we have a great conversation ahead, but looking forward to that dialogue. And again, really glad to be here.
No, thank you. As former mayor, and you touched on this a little bit, you saw in a very tangible way every day what infrastructure means for quality of life and economic potential of a community. What are you personally most excited about as you begin leading the USDOT?
Well, it's almost hard to pick one area because there is so much compelling and exciting work going on. There are the very futuristic things that I think capture a lot of the sizzle when people think about infrastructure in our lifetimes, from commercial space travel to what's going on with drones. But there's a lot of stuff that's closer to home and closer to 2021. I'm excited about the electrification of vehicle travel, but we know that'll only fully happen if we succeed in our goal of deploying 500,000 charging stations across the country, as the president has promised to do, and we're seeking to make a reality with the cooperation, we hope, of Congress. It's about making sure that we are building in smarter ways. So that not only our cars are more sustainable, but people have more alternatives. Sometimes the best way to get somewhere is in a car. Sometimes we can make sure there are ways to do it on foot or by transit or micromobility, like these bikes and scooters, which are so promising. But as we've learned in some cities the hard way, you got to get it just right. All of those things, I think, are incredibly compelling. But frankly, there's a lot of unglamorous work to do as well. It can be just as important, just as meaningful, just as economically powerful to just fill in that hole in the road as it is to build the most futuristic and appealing thing we can think of. So we got to take care of the basics, fix it first, be smart about the inventory that we already have as a country, and then make sure that across that we're setting up for a future that's going to be upon us sooner than we think.
You know, so much of our investments in infrastructure, they impact our communities every single day. They impact Americans as they get to work, as they get ready for work, and as they go home at the end of the day. What do you feel your mission at the USDOT means to the individual American, the American people?
You know, part of how I think I qualified as an infrastructure nerd was years ago, I began talking about infrastructure issues as connected to nothing less profound than the meaning of life. Well, let me explain what I mean. Not everybody finds their professional meaning in infrastructure the way engineers do and the way many policymakers who work on this do. But everybody will find that their ability to lead a meaningful life depends on the infrastructure available to them. If what brings meaning to your life is an ambitious idea to start a business, well, you're not going to be free to work on that if you don't even know whether you're going to be able to get a glass of clean, safe drinking water out of the tap when you get up in the morning. If the meaning of life for you has to do with faith or family, you're going to be hard pressed to really fully invest that in your day-to-day life. If you don't even have a safe and affordable way to get around town to run errands or go about your everyday life. If the meaning of life for you has to do with the life of the mind and your studies, if the most important thing in your life right now is getting through school, and there's not a road to get you there safely, that's going to stand in your way. And so I think it's really important before we get into the very technical aspects of what's at stake in infrastructure to just remember that people's ability to pursue lives of their choosing, what we in America generally call freedom, is inseparable from the choices we make about transportation infrastructure, and for that matter, things like water infrastructure and increasingly digital infrastructure. This can be a matter of life and death, and it can certainly be a matter of prosperity or its opposite. That's part of why equity considerations need to be on our mind as well. We know not only that neighborhoods, often disproportionately communities of color, were often left behind by the infrastructure choices of the past, but sometimes it was even worse. infrastructure arrived in these neighborhoods in a very destructive fashion, like a highway that divided, separated, or even wrecked what might have previously been an energized and thriving neighborhood. All of these things are connected, and this has been true since the beginning of civilization as we know it. Now, going into the 2020s, we've got to have that deep understanding about how individual lives, families' lives, and communities' lives are shaped by infrastructure so that we can make those concrete choices, no pun intended, about what we're physically installing and maintaining and putting into the ground with a view toward what they're going to enable, how they can make life easier and not harder.
So all of our panels today talked about infrastructure challenges, whether that was across the energy grids and extreme weather events or assessing the risk of dams. And the grade told us there is so much to do in some of these categories. But we also talked about solutions today, what it will take to raise these grades. And so much of it comes back to commitment from the federal government to be a strong partner. And that means leadership and political will. Do you believe we have the political will to get these big ideas done?
I think we do, or at least I think we can. Look, the American people already want us to do this. And I think that infrastructure is already one of the most bipartisan things that this administration is taking on. As you said, your research demonstrates that this isn't just a red versus blue state issue. This isn't just a rural issue or an urban issue. This is a national issue. And the benefits are enormous. It's a very attractive time to invest, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime moment to invest. Interest rates are at historic lows. Underemployment and unemployment are higher than they should be. There's never been a better reason for politicians, regardless of party, regardless of ideology, to want to get this done. Now, I also believe as a former mayor that a bottom-up approach on transportation programs and funding is also really going to help us. It's going to help us marshal the full power of American ingenuity and innovation and capacity because, all the answers don't have to come from Washington. It's just that more of the resources should. So I'm looking forward to working with Congress in Washington, but I'm also looking forward to working with state, local, territorial, tribal partners, communities that have often made tough decisions to vote in measures to raise the revenue for infrastructure. That already show that bipartisan political will that is sometimes in short supply around here in Washington. And I really think we can summon that energy, that determination to get something done. And when we do, we and future generations will be proud of what we achieve right now in the 2020s, not only to repair crumbling infrastructure that's been there and to put people to work right now, but to prepare this country for the future.
Well, that's good to hear. So finally, is there a particular infrastructure solution that you want to talk about? We know as mayor, you really explored some innovations in infrastructure. What do you want to make sure people know in terms of solutions for infrastructure challenges?
Well, again, I approach this question with some humility because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that there are so many great ideas and great things underway across American communities that we won't always have the answer here. But part of why I believe that is that I did see some very promising, specific things that we were able to do during my time serving my own community. When I took office, we had been hit so hard by the economic losses that came with the Great Recession that some were calling us a dying city. And when we clawed our way out of that, infrastructure was a huge part of how we did it. A lot relied on partnerships. We launched a Smart Streets initiative, for example, that was demonstrating that a city our size could benefit as much from a complete streets philosophy as America's biggest cities. And we did it in our historically underserved west side as well as our downtown. Reimagined our streets and were able to attract hundreds of millions of dollars in major investment, basically just by establishing that streets are not just for shooting vehicles through your city as quickly as possible, but places where pedestrians and bicycles and small businesses should be able to coexist. We worked on enhancements to our intercity train system connecting us to Chicago. We saw our airport become an international airport. We undertook, with help from philanthropic partners, an effort called Commuters Trust, which was about subsidizing the rides on rideshare for lower wage workers to be able to get to work past where transit could take them, and found that there were so many benefits in terms of reduced absenteeism and costs, both to those individuals who sometimes were depending on an unreliable cousin with an unreliable car to get to work, that it was actually worth it for employers to begin participating and help funding those trips to work as well. So those are some of the innovations that we saw make a difference in our community. Ultimately, it's about prioritizing limited resources effectively and unlocking new ones to solve problems. And all of that is definitely informing my work here at the department as we seek to learn from inside this building, where there's an extremely talented career staff, and out around the country, where I know so many communities are already working these problems creatively. And again, sometimes it'll be something really innovative, sizzling, high tech. Sometimes it'll be as simple as having a better way to prioritize which potholes ought to be fixed first. And sometimes that's just as important in terms of the difference that it makes to the lives of the people we serve.
Well, I look forward to seeing some of those innovations put into place. Secretary Buttigieg, thank you so much for joining me here today. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and we all wish you the best of luck and look forward to working with you in your new role. Thank you.
Same here. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.